Welcome to the second section on the remarkable body. This section is going to cover digestion and absorption. We're going to start with the mouth, and we talked about this in the last video where the salivary gland releases enzymes which do start the chemical process of digestion. But we also have the mechanical process of digestion, which is that chewing and crushing, so taking the food and breaking it down into smaller parts. Then the chemical part of digestion, so those enzymes start to work, and this is where carbohydrate digestion actually starts. And this is from, like I said, from the saliva, and it's digesting that starch. Remember, I talked about this, I'd mentioned this earlier. If you take a really refined carbohydrate such as a saltine cracker and you put it into your mouth and you chew, you don't swallow yet, but you chew and chew and chew until it comes into a paste, you'll actually notice that it becomes sweet because starch will actually start to break down into sugar in the mouth. Now, if you're chewing really quickly and you swallow first before it gets to that point, a lot of times you won't notice that. But next time you have the opportunity, try that out and see if you can notice the sugar. The food is then going to travel from the mouth through the esophagus. There's no real digestion that happens here. Remember, digestion is the breakdown of food into the individual nutrients. So it's more of just a travel. It moves through what's called peristalsis. That's how it moves from the mouth down to the stomach. This is the stomach right here. And within the stomach, we have which is right here. The main function is that it grinds and churns. So think of almost like your washing machine where you're washing clothes, where it's being grinded and it is churning, and it actually is being turned into this paste, which is called chyme. One of the most important functions of the stomach, though, is that protein digestion starts. And it's because it releases an acid. It's called hydrochloric acid. And it brings this pH down to a level of 2. So this is a very low pH. And that low pH will actually uncoil protein. Now, we haven't really gone over protein yet, but protein is a very complex macronutrient compared to fat and carbohydrates. So it really needs to uncoil and unfold first. Now, that pH is so acidic, so it's so low pH is so acidic, it will burn other tissues. And we'll talk about how this contributes to heartburn next. But the stomach actually protects itself. It protects the lining of the stomach by having this mucus coating. And that's how the stomach lining is protected from this very low pH. Now, once the food travels from the stomach, it will then go into the small intestines. So these are the small intestines. Now, the small intestines are the most important organ in digestion and absorption. The reason is that most of the processes occur. So we have starch digestion starts in the mouth, and a little bit, some of your fat digestion may occur to a small extent in the mouth, but mostly starch. Most everything halts in the stomach, except that protein is uncoiled. So protein digestion starts in the stomach. But now digestion of all of our macronutrients, so remember those are fat, protein, and carbohydrate. All of those have gone through a mechanical digestion. So it's breaking down through a mechanical process of chewing and grinding in the mouth and then churning in the stomach. And now the enzymes from the small intestines, as well as the pancreas, will now break apart those larger molecules into smaller molecules. So we're going from food, digesting from a food product to individual nutrients. The second part is where is also very important, and this is the absorption. So remember, absorption, when we think about absorption, this is the transfer, essentially, of those individual nutrients from the intestines into the bloodstream. So it's bringing those nutrients into the body. That's absorption. Digestion, the breakdown of food into nutrients. Absorption, taking those nutrients from the intestines into the body. So that's why digestion and absorption mostly happen in the intestines, and the intestines is really our most important organ in digestion and absorption. Now the pancreas releases both carbohydrates, protein, and fat digesting enzymes, breaking carbohydrate down to simple sugars, proteins into amino acids, and fats to fatty acids. And we're going to go through each of those processes when we cover each of those macronutrients in the upcoming chapter. Now, the liver has a lot of functions in the body, and we'll get into that especially next week. But when we talk about carbohydrates, as far as digestion and absorption is concerned, the liver makes bile. And then the gallbladder is actually, so the liver is here. The gallbladder is this tiny little green area right here. This is the gallbladder. It stores and releases bile. Bile aids in fat digestion and absorption. It's an emulsifier, so it really helps bring that fat into a liquid environment, allows the enzymes to work on the fat better to break it down into fatty acids, and assist in the absorption process. So this is important. Bile has nothing to do with protecting the stomach lining. So mucus protects the stomach lining from that very acidic environment. Bile aids in fat digestion and absorption. So lastly, we have the colon. So the colon here, so remember these are the small intestines. Then we have the colon. The colon mainly absorbs water, and it's going to absorb some minerals. Now, a lot of the minerals are absorbed in the small intestines, but whatever remaining minerals will be absorbed in the colon. And then fiber, although it's not digested, and we'll talk about this next week when we cover carbohydrates, but fiber is mostly passes through undigested in the body, but small amounts of fiber, these small fragments, will be a little bit digested, and that's mainly by the bacteria that exist within the colon. And that is going to be all for this section on digestion and absorption.